Hi BookTube, it's Roz and I'm here with my plans for July, which is kind of like 75% Jane Austen July stuff because, I love Jane Austen July. It was one of the things that first sucked me into BookTube. So thank you to Katie and Marissa and Claudia for hosting it again this year. And one of the reasons why I love Jane Austen July so much is because Jane Austen is one of the few authors that I can not just reread, but reread her work repeatedly and keep coming back to. But I might forget to do that, and Jane Austen July really kind of encourages me to. And the prompts are basically, or challenges are basically the same each year, but I always find something new to do with that. So prompt number one, always, and the one thing that you really have to do to be part of Jane Austen July is to read one of Austen's 6 main novels. And I'm on a kind of a rotation, working through these and then going back to the beginning again, if that makes sense. And this year, it's time to read the book that I read in 2018, which was Mansfield Park. So I get to go back to Mansfield Park. I'm delighted about that because Mansfield Park, it's a nice addition. I love the kind of woodcuts in here. Mansfield Park is one of Austen's novels that doesn't always kind of win you over on a first reading, but each time you go back to it, you in my experience, I love it more. I find more in it to enjoy. So I'm very happy that will be going back to Mansfield Park. And I am going to use that as a bit of a springboard to kind of shape a lot of my other Jane Austen July reading. I will explain, because Mansfield Park has many strengths of the novel, and one of them is that it's the novel where we get to see more about Jane's own relationship with the Navy and her brothers who were in the Navy. That sort of comes into that novel. Another great thing about Mansfield Park is it's the book that gives us the best indication that we get in her books about that she did actually have thoughts about and understand where the kind of wealth that often some of her characters have comes from, because she actually talks about plantations, and slavery. Many interesting things in the books, but the two things that I want to home in on this year are this. Despite what people think about Mansfield Park, it is actually one of her funniest novels. There is huge amounts of comedy in Mansfield Park, really beautifully done. The other thing about Mansfield Park is that it has a play within the novel, and that's a key element in the plot. So I'm going to be particularly thinking about Jane Austen and the theatre and drama, and Jane Austen and comedy for this Jane Austen July. So my non-fiction choice, because one of the prompts always is to read a non-fiction book about Jane Austen's work or her life or her times, and I'm going to read The Genius of Jane Austen. The rest of the title for that is Her Love of Theatre and Why She's a Hit in Hollywood by Paula Byrne. And that was originally written in 2002, but then she did a sort of a slight update of it for a new edition in 2017. And I've dipped into it in the past, but I've never read it cover to cover, so I will be reading all of that and will then sort of follow up, linking that back to Mansfield Park, and follow up some of the themes from it in my other reading. So, always another of the prompts is to read things by Jane Austen that are not one of her 6 main novels. So, I'm gradually working through, is a better way to put it, Jane Austen's letters. This is collected edition, collected by Deirdre LeFay, and you can see I'm kind of like partway through. And what I'm going to do is Paula Byrne, in her book, The Genius of Jane Austen, writing about, draws on Jane Austen's letters quite a bit. Times when she talks about going to theatre, times when she talks about the family theatricals. They put on plays with friends in the same way that happens in Mansfield Park. And when she references a letter, I'm going to go and read the full letter in here and use that to sort of carry me a little bit further through this book, but with a bit of context. So that's thing number one. And also, I am sort of 2/3 of the way through Jane Austen's Juvenilia. This collection is called Katja and Other Writings, but basically it's all her juvenilia, all the things she wrote as a young woman before she started writing proper novels. So before Lady Susan and before The Six that were published in her lifetime. And I'm going to read the last chunk of these that I haven't read, but also I'm going to go back and look at, there's a couple of plays in here that she wrote for her family, probably for her family to perform. One of them is called The Visit, but also the Juvenilia really sort of demonstrates Austen's developing humour and her love of comedy and her enjoyment of the burlesque, and which she got in part from her enjoyment of the theatre. So that's how it's kind of all interconnecting for me. Another of the regular prompts is to read a book by or work by a contemporary of Jane Austen. So something that was written between 1775 and 1817, her lifetime. Now, my plan is to read some of the contemporary dramatists that she was, whose plays she was watching and enjoying, and things that we know she saw at the theatre, or things that she references in her letters, and which Paula Byrne then picks up in her book about Jane Austen Theatre. So. And in particular, well, I've already read Lover's Vows by Elizabeth Inchbald that features in... Oh, sorry, cat. Just squished the cat. Now go. He's very tolerant. Lover's Vows by Elizabeth Inchbald is the one that features in Mansfield Park. So I've already read that, so I won't reread that. But instead, I'm going to chiefly home in on Hannah Cowley, who we know Jane Austen was. She was a very popular dramatist, one of the most popular dramatists of her day, who's become less, she sort of slipped out of fame somewhat, but her work is readily available for free in Project Gutenberg or on the Internet Archive. And recently, one of them, Belle's Stratagem, has been revived on in the London Theatre, certainly. So I will probably, I hope, read Belle's Stratagem, Who's the Dupe, Which is the Man, and The Runaway, I think, because they're all plays that have a sort of focus on, that are comedies, have a focus on class and relationships, which you can kind of see the influence of potentially in Mansfield Park and indeed in all Jane's novels. So, and particularly I think those ones that were known influences on Pride and Prejudice and Emma and Mansfield Park. So we'll see how I get on. If any of you think, oh, actually, I wouldn't mind reading some Hannah Cowley too, and, do say, and maybe we could have a little conversation on Voxer about that, or even maybe do a Zoom with to make a video about our experiences of reading Hannah Cowley, and where we see some sort of links across to Jane Austen's work. Now, another of the standard Jane Austen July prompts, and the last of the reading prompts, is to read a retelling of a Jane Austen book or a work of historical fiction set in her time. Now, I often don't have the best experience with the sort of retellings or books that are sort of inspired by Jane, sort of writing about a character from one of her books and sort of giving it a different angle. They often don't work brilliantly for me. But the historical fiction set in a time is more successful, but I'm going to cheat slightly this year. But when I tell you what I'm going to read, I think you'll understand why I'm cheating, okay? Because I am going to read Katie of Books and Things, our Jane Austen July host, her new novel, which comes out in July. So how could I resist it? It's called The Trouble with Mrs. Montgomery, Hurst. It's set about 20 years after Jane Austen died. So it's, as I say, a little bit of a cheat. But I do know from what Katie said that it's definitely got a bit of a Jane Austen feel to it. You know, so you can see her affection for Jane Austen in the book. So and I'm going to her book launch, so I'll be able to get a copy of it there. And I won't be able to resist reading it in July. So it was natural to sort of squeeze it in there. So that's all the reading prompts. Now there are 2 watching prompts for Jane Austen July as well. And let's get that right, to watch one direct screen adaptation of a Jane Austen work, and secondly, to watch a modern adaptation or retelling. Now, my plan is to at least dip into From Mansfield with Love, which was a 2014-15 sort of YouTube modern retelling of Mansfield Park, and it just seems like the obvious thing to combine with my Jane Austen July plans. If I get to also watch a film version of one of the novels, I will, but I'm not promising that because I don't always end up doing the watching prompts. So that's, I may not get to all of From Mansfield with Love in July, because there's 100 episodes, which is quite a bit. But if I do it alongside reading it, the novel, we'll see how it works out. So that's my Jane Austen July TBR. I am going to read a few other bits and pieces in July. I'll quickly kind of whisk through those before I finish. I'm reading things for the BookTube Prize semi-finals at the moment, and I'm certainly going to have 2 novels to read in July: Wellness by Nathan Hill and The Reformatory by Tannarive Due. I also need to kind of refresh my memory of The House of Doors by Twan, because that's the last of the books in my group, and but that one I previously read, but it was a little while ago, so I need to be a fair and impartial judge. I need to refresh that one too. So those are those. Then my in real life, in-person book group made a great choice of book this for July. I'm so delighted. It's Marzahn, Amour by Katja Oskamp, which she published in German in 2019, and then the translation by Joe Heinrich, I think it is. Heinrich, yeah, came out in 2022. I've heard some really positive things about Marzahn, Mon Amour from a few booktubers whose opinion I respect, like Lindy, I think, and Sean. So Joe Smith has talked about. So fingers crossed for this. It's an unusual book. It's like almost like a series of connected short stories. Not exactly. It's someone who retrains in later life as a chiropodist, and then kind of the stories of the people that she does their feet, and kind of hears their life story, or what's going on for them, and like a sequence of vignettes that sort of describes a community. Really looking forward to that. Then I've got more Elizabeth Bowen to come in July. There'll be the second half of her selected short stories, the first half of which I've read in June. And then finally, the final bit of our deep dive into Elizabeth Bowen, her non-fiction travel memoir, which I do actually have here to wave at you, A Time in Rome. So it's kind of like a travel memoir, but describing Rome and living there. It was published in 1959, so in the sort of later in Bowen's life and writing. Then I've got a graphic memoir to read as well, Factory Summers by Guy Delisle. In June, I'm reading another of his, Pyongyang. He's a French-Canadian comic artist who now lives in France. This has come highly recommended to me by Jem, who's a member of my team at work, and I'll report back. So, what else? I've got two kind of rolling things that I'll still be reading in July, the Iliad and in parenthesis by David Jones. But I'm going to be starting, I think, two other long, slow reads and a third thing that I expect to start in July but may not finish. So let me explain. Number one new long, slow read is this book of the poems of Nazim Hikmet. He's a Turkish poet. These were translated by Randy Blasing Mutlu Konak. But what is thrilling about this for me is this was a present from Berna. And Berna and I got to meet up while I was in Turkey earlier this month, and she kindly gave me, and he's one of the best known sort of 20th century Turkish poets. So I'm thrilled to get to that, and I will gradually work my way through these. And I've been neglecting my scally-daddling around the world lately, haven't I? It's because I've got to a point where it's quite hard to find new things to read for the remaining kind of like only a handful of countries I've got left, but well, 10, I think, but they're tough ones to cover. So I'm going to cover 3 of them, I hope, by reading Indigenous Literatures from Micronesia, edited by Evelyn Flores and Emilita Kileng. I've actually read some Emilita Kileng already from one of the other countries, and it's the sort of thing that I think will be better read over sort of 2 or 3 months, because it's a whole mixture of short stories, poetry, essays, and by a multitude of different authors. But it will mean that I read a number of things from three Micronesian countries that I haven't yet read: Nauru, Palau, and I've forgotten what the other one is, but I'll put it in the show notes. So, and then the final thing that I hope to get to read in July, or at least start, is a non-fiction book, Eve, How Women Have Shaped 200 Million Years of Prehistory and History, something like that. I'll put the right title at the bottom. And Heidi spoke really positively about this book, so does Lindy of Lindy's Magpie Reads, and I'm looking forward to getting my teeth stuck into that one. So that's my July plans. I hope you have brilliant July plans too, and do tell me if you've read any of these, or if you fancy reading any of these. And as I say, if you'd like to read some Hannah Cowley during Jane Austen July, let me know, and maybe we can connect.